So what is the VertiPack engine that we talk about? The VertiPack engine is the underlying data storage and query engine that's used for tabular data models, which includes analysis services running in tabular mode, as well as Power Pivot for Excel and Power Pivot for SharePoint data models that we can query. What VertiPack's really known for is being blindingly fast. Compared to doing queries in relational databases or in many cases against multidimensional cubes, VertiPack can outperform these other technologies by orders of magnitude. So let's talk about why is it so fast. This diagram, we have a SQL Server data warehouse on the bottom, and we're sourcing data into a couple of different models. On the left is the VertiPack engine. That's a tabular model. This also could be Power Pivot. On the right is a traditional multi-dimensional OLAP cube. And when we put data into these models, normally we're using a cached mode. We can use rollup or direct query, but the normal case is that we're using a cached data storage mode. So when we process these models, we're reading data into them. And traditionally on a multidimensional cube, we read data from the data warehouse and put it into a multidimensional cube and store it in disk in that cube. On the tabular side, we read that data out and store it in RAM. So you're starting to get an idea of why is this so fast, because we're not reading our cube data from disk anymore. We're reading that data into RAM and just querying it right from memory. So if we send a query to each of these models, and normally on the tabular side you send DAX queries, but you can send MDX. So this is just a really super simple MDX style query, and we could send this to either one of these models. But the process is going to be different when we do that. So when we send that query to the multidimensional cube, the cube data will need to be read from disk. At least initially there will be some caching, so the second time the same query is run, it will be faster. But the initial query is going to read data from disk and resolve that, cache it in RAM, and then sort it out and so on. So this is quite a bit slower than if you were just storing it in RAM, as we do with the VertiPack engine and tabular models. So with the tabular query, same query, but the data is already in RAM, so there isn't that I/O latency going out to the disk or the SAN and pulling data from there. We can just read it in much quicker. And a RAM access can be a million times faster than a disk access. So even though the VertiPack engine is doing quite a bit of brute force scanning, that scanning is just a million times faster, so we get better performance. So let's look at an example of storing all this information in RAM and what impact that has on queries. So I built a quick data model with analysis services in tabular mode and brought in about 215 or so million rows of sales data. So this gives us a large data set to work with, more rows than are going to fit in RAM in most technologies. So it'll give us a really good test of this. So we've got that loaded already. So let's look at a query against the original relational data source, and this is an unindexed table, so we haven't added indexes or anything like that to improve it. We're just going to read through this 215 million rows from disk and summarize by some random attribute. So we just said this query says we're going to select the time key and the sum of sales from the fact table where some item key that I chose out of the blue is equal to 19367, and then group by that time key. So I'm just going to press the execute button and let that run. So while this is running, I'm going to take a peek over on the database server and just see what its performance is like. And if I look at my overview here, my CPU is only about 5% used. So the server has 4 CPUs. And it's really not much CPU going on. If I look at the disk, I have about 200 megabytes per second being read. So I can see that SQL Server is very busy reading data from the disk here. Okay, so our query is finished. Notice that took 3 minutes and 39 seconds to run. So considering a pretty big table scan and some summarizing, it's not terrible. But let's look at doing the same thing using our VertiPack based tabular model. So this is a DAX query that will do the same thing as the SQL query we just ran. So we're saying evaluate, summarize. The syntax is very different. In future lessons, we'll go through DAX in quite a lot of detail, but essentially we're doing the same thing. So we're getting a filtering the sales table for that item key is the same, and then summarizing that by the time key and the sum of the store sales. So I'm going to press the execute button again here. Let me choose the right database. So if I click on the execute button, it's completed, and that took 1 second instead of 3 minutes and 39 seconds.